Hey everybody, Gormos here with another War Thunder Simulator battle video. So in this video, since quite a few people have asked for it, I'm going to take a look at the P-51D Mustang. So let's talk a bit about this plane before we take a look in a battle in it. Now, the Mustang is of course famous for being a great escort fighter during World War II, having the range and the altitude to provide proper cover for high-flying bomber groups. In War Thunder, at its battle rating and at the altitude we usually fly at, I would say the P-51D is, when it comes to its performance as a fighter, a bit of a jack of all trades. It is pretty good at most things, but not really the best at anything at the same time. Two traits of the Mustang in which it would really shine and be among the best, its range and its high altitude performance compared to much of its opposition, won't matter too much most of the time in War Thunder. Now, the Mustang can turn a bit better, or at least as good as most fighters it will meet on the German side, though not so much on the Japanese, understandably. And thanks to its good aerodynamics, the P-51 is also fast. Though again, on its battle rating and on the altitude you usually fly in War Thunder, you will find opponents that are faster. The plane does have a somewhat decent roll rate, especially at higher speeds. The P-51 is a bit heavier than a lot of its competition though, especially the 109s and the Japanese fighters, with the P-50D Anton being on a similar weight or slightly heavier. So that means that the P-51 has a worse power to weight ratio than the Bf-109s, for example, which has a negative impact on acceleration, and it won't be as good in the vertical than a Bf-109. Now, the plane can build up good amount of speed quickly in a slight dive though, thanks to its good aerodynamics. Armament-wise, we have of course 650 caliber machine guns, which I found perform quite well most of the time, especially in shorter ranges where the fire is more focused. Most of the time a relatively short burst is enough, though sometimes versus more heavily armored targets it might take a bit longer to bring a plane down. Also, the machine guns have of course a pretty large ammo supply compared to cannon armament, so you won't run out quickly. And the Mustang is equipped with a gyro gun sight to help you aim. It is set for your convergence range, though the usefulness of it is a bit disputed. Some like it, some don't. I think it can be quite helpful at the correct range, but with the quickly changing ranges during a dogfight, it can also be a distraction when you're at the wrong range. Now, this week we have Germany versus US in the rotation, so this video will feature mostly this matchup. I will most likely make another P-51 video in the future versus Japanese planes as well, to show this matchup. I do think that the P-51 is more straightforward to use versus German planes though, since it can turn with most of them as well as outrun at least some of them. However, the Bf-109s have a better power to weight ratio on web, and while they have usually a slightly higher wing loading, it's not that big of difference. So don't try to follow a Bf-109 into a sustained climb or a climbing turn. On high enough altitude the power to weight ratio difference would disappear, but again we don't get much opportunity to fly high enough for that. Now, there is one thing I want to mention here though. It is of course well known that planes like the P-51 are good at high altitudes, and many will understandably therefore assume that simply means my plane is better suited for high altitude than my opponent's, so the higher I am when getting in a fight, the more of a power advantage I have. Even in the lower altitude ranges, like fighting on 3 km high is better than 2, 4 is better than 3 km. And of course in the sense of gaining an altitude advantage over your opponent or preventing him from getting one, that is true. However, purely from the standpoint of who has more engine power, it is not quite as simple as that, and I would like to explain quickly why, as it is useful to know for the P-51 as well as quite a few other planes. And to do that, I have to quickly go over a few basics of superchargers in World War II aircraft engines. Now, super or turbocharging is important for aircraft engines to counter the decreasing air density as altitude increases. Lower air density means less oxygen and therefore massively lower power output from the engine. The supercharger compresses the air and forces the compressed air, denser air, into the engine, and so counters the low air density. The engine has more oxygen to burn and again can produce more power. And of course the supercharger can compress air past normal atmospheric pressure, so the engine can produce even more power than a natural breathing one could at sea level with the same displacement. Now, the most basic supercharger you find on World War II aircraft is a single-stage, single-speed supercharger. which means there is one impeller driven by the engine at a fixed speed, compressing air and forcing it into the engine. The P-40 and the P-39's Allison engines had such a supercharger. Now, there are a few limitations with this though. In order to keep the boost pressure up at high altitude, the supercharger would of course have to be very powerful and provide a lot of compression to counter the very low air density at very high altitude. But if you would put such a powerful super on the engine, it would overboost and destroy the engine at low altitude. So, while the single-stage super increases power and maximum altitude compared to a natural breathing engine, the altitude range at which you can keep your power up is still somewhat limited. A well-known problem of the P-40 of course. In order to increase the altitude ranges at which the engine can produce its full power, you need a supercharger that can vary the compression it provides as air density changes. There were two ways this was done. One was to add the clutch and gears so the supercharger could run at different speeds, and the other is to have multiple stages, usually two. That means there's a second impeller which is bypassed at lower altitudes and can be activated on higher altitudes to provide more boost as air density decreases. In some cases the second stage was a turbocharger, like on the P-38 Lightning. Now, turbochargers give you more of a power gain, because the engine does not have to sacrifice horsepower to drive it. It is driven by exhaust gases. However, turbos at the time were also large and bulky, and it was difficult at the time to get them to withstand the enormous heat they produced. The P-38 had enough room in the tail boom for such a large turbocharger. Often later engines had a combination of both multiple speeds and stages. Now, the P-51D's Packard Merlin engine has a two-stage, two-speed supercharger. So, when you fly in War Thunder, that means when you take off in your P-51, you have the maximum boost from your first stage. As you gain altitude, the air gets thinner, so your boost and your engine power go slowly down, until you reach the point where the second stage kicks in and your maximum boost is back up and you have maximum engine power again. That does of course mean that there is a power gap when you are high enough for the first stage to start losing power, but not high enough for the second stage to kick in yet. Since the P-51 is meant to perform well at very high altitudes when escorting bombers, the second stage kicks in a bit late, at around 5000 meters, at least with auto engine control. So even though the P-51 is certainly better at higher altitudes than its competition, higher does not automatically mean better, it depends on the altitude range. In comparison, the P-F-109's DB605 has a single-stage variable speed supercharger. Now, since it is a single stage, it won't be able to keep up its power at the same very high altitude than the P-51 can and its second stage. However, as the name variable speed suggests, it has a sophisticated gearbox with multiple speeds and a fluid coupling which automatically changes speeds as necessary very quickly. So while the P-F-109 can't keep its power up at the same very high altitude as the P-51, below this critical altitude where the air gets too thin for the plane for it to keep up its boost, it can keep up its power more smoothly without big gaps like you have between the two stages in the P-51. Just wanted to mention that, as it might be useful information for the P-51 and other planes with different supers or turbos as well. Now, if you wonder how to find out at what altitude you are producing full power and at which one you do not, you can hop in a test flight and simply look at the boost gauge while climbing. Then you can see where your boost pressure is dropping or rising. And if you have trouble finding the right gauge in the different languages, just move the throttle forwards and backwards a bit, then just look what instrument is reacting accordingly. Well, enough of superchargers for now. Let's take a look at the fight in the P-51. Now, this match takes place on the Battle for Bastogne map. I was patrolling at relatively high altitude when I noticed some cannon fire below. There was a fight going on, so I dived down to join it. I'm too late to help a teammate which gets taken out in front of me, but I can see a Focke-Wulf 490 flying by me from left to right. I pull up to get above him. I have lots of speed from my dive, which I can use to my advantage at this point to regain some altitude, but I fly into the clouds by accident, and as I do so I lose sight on the Focke-Wulf 490. I check around for it as I dive back out of the clouds, trying to find the 190 again, and I do spot the plane behind me in the distance, which I assume is the Focke-Wulf 490. So I slowly pull up in a loop to get some altitude back and slowly turn back towards him. However, at this time I spot some white tracers down on the deck, which I assume are German cannon tracers, another teammate in trouble. So I change my plans and instead dive on the plane that is firing the cannons, which at this point I assume is a Focke-Wulf 190, and I hope this time I'm fast enough to save a teammate. However, as I get closer it turns out it is a F4UC, which is also cannon armed, chasing a Focke-Wulf 190. Now I am faster than the F4U at this point and I could easily catch the Focke-Wulf 190, and for a second I think about doing just that. But there are other planes around, no reason for two planes to focus on the same target, so I pull up again, and just as I do so I indeed see a second Focke-Wulf 190 coming in behind me, diving on the F4U. So I go after this 190, and as he pulls up I get a good opportunity for a shot, and I do some damage to the 190's wing. But at the same time I can see tracers flying by me, yet another Focke-Wulf 190 is behind me. So I start some barrel rolls to evade and get the nose down to speed up again. Here I make a bit of a mistake though, my barrel rolls are a bit too tight, focus too much on roll rate, which the 190 can use, and I take a hit which damages my wing. I realized my mistake. I focus more on elevator authority to make the barrel rolls wider, which gives the 190 with its high wing loading more trouble following them. Though with the damaged wing I stall the plane a bit. Now I have to be a bit careful with turning since my wing's lift is reduced thanks to the damage. I do get behind the 190 with another roll, but just as I do so, a Spitfire dives in and takes him out. But another 190 is attacking me from behind at this point. The newcomer passes behind me and ends up to my right, and I go into a high yo-yo turn to the right, turning into him, and I come down behind him as he turns around and comes back my way. Now the Focke-Wulf 190 had more energy than me and is out of range pretty fast. I follow him for a bit, hoping he might go up and come looping around to attack and I can intercept him while he does that. After a bit I check my rear real quick to make sure there isn't another one behind me, and as I look forward again there is yet another Focke-Wulf 190 coming in from the right, crossing my flight path as he dives past. So I go after him, hoping I can intercept him as he pulls up. And I do have enough speed to stay close enough to fire, and as our speed gets lower I fire a burst which needs very little lead thanks to the low speed and takes the 190 out. Now I do hear some cannon fire and I look around as I get the nose back down to look for another plane, and soon I can see another Focke-Wulf 190. I go into a barrel roll again, this time a wider one from the start, to evade and hopefully be able to get behind him, and it looks like I might be able to roll out behind him, but the 190 pulls straight up instead. But I can't focus on him anymore, because there are two more 190s and an MA410 coming in from the front. With so many enemy planes I call for some assistance and go in a high yo-yo turn to turn after them. They seem to turn around as well, but with their higher wing loading can't turn as tight. The one doing the widest turn ends up in front of my guns, and I take a shot as I fly past, taking a part of his wing off. I push the nose down a bit while turning to rebuild some speed, and I look around for targets, expecting them to attack me, since they were so close. But I can't spot them right away. But then I can see a smoking friendly plane, and it seems he is under attack, so I move that way. As I get closer it turns out it is a Corsair chased by Focke-Wulf 190, which is in turn chased by a Spitfire, which in turn is chased by another Focke-Wulf 190, which is now chased by me. I fire a few bursts after him. My aim is a bit wobbly, the P-51 has a bit of a yaw instability, but it seems I did enough damage to make the plane uncontrollable, and eventually the 190 goes down. Now I pull up and look back, and as I do so I can see another 190 coming in to attack from behind and below, so I turn into him and push the nose down. As he passes me I roll to the right and go up into a high yo-yo turn towards him. Now turning on lower speed my damaged wing gives me a bit of trouble again, and I can see that he could get a shot on me, so I push the nose down out of his flight path, roll to the left and go up and come around again. Now if it would be on higher altitude here I could have rolled in behind him, but we are too low to pull out from that at the moment. So instead of looping in behind him I have to turn towards him in the horizontal. This time though I can see that he won't get his guns on me, but I don't get mine on him either, so I just keep up the turn for now. He keeps turning as well, and despite my damaged wing, in such a flat turn contest, the Mustang with its lower wing loading clearly has the upper hand, and I get slowly closer. the 190 builds up a bit of speed by diving into the valley and then rolls around and turns the other way. He can't come around enough to fire though, so that gives me an opportunity for a shot. The yaw instability of the plane in such maneuvers gives me a bit of trouble though, and I miss. So I go up and turn around again, and again it seems I will be on target just a bit faster, so I take the opportunity to take a shot and turn out of the way and go around again. This time though I got a few hits, but nothing critical it seems. So I go around again, taking advantage of my slight lead as long as I have it. Also, I try to work in a bit of vertical maneuvering into the turns by going for high yo-yo turns and hopefully gain a bit of an energy advantage as well. I get in a few more bursts and a few more hits, but still no major damage it seems. And eventually, since I'm always flying straight just a little bit longer to take my shot, the 190 also gets his guns on targets, so this is getting a little bit dangerous. But I did manage to build up a bit of extra energy, so change of plans. I use the speed I have to pull up straight, and when the 190 comes around, I go into a barrel roll and come back down behind him, where I can use the better turn rate of my plane to get lead. And when I do, eventually take a shot. And this time, when I do take my shot, I get a few good hits, which set the Focke-Wulf 190 on fire, and he eventually goes down. Now, it seems this area is finally clear, and I am a little bit low on ammo, so I start to make my way back towards the airfield. However, I don't get very far before I see some tracers in the distance, another friendly plane in trouble. So I can't go back to base to rearm just yet, I have to help out whoever is under attack. Now, as I get closer, the enemy plane turns out to be a Bf-109, how exotic, chasing a Mustang. I attempt to get a shot at the 109 as he crosses in front of me as I come in, but the attempt fails. I don't quite get the lead I need to fire, but the Bf-109 stays focused on the other Mustang, so I can slot in behind him and keep attacking. So I go after the Bf-109 again, get him in the circle of the gyro gun sight and fire again. And this time I get a good burst in, which is enough to take out the Bf-109. Now I'm really almost out of ammo and very low on fuel too, so I head back to base to rearm. When I'm done reloading, there's only one enemy plane left, and I fly towards the enemy base looking for it. But while I do so, the last enemy plane, another Focke-Wulf 190, attacks another Mustang, which is calling for help and is chasing it towards our airfield. So I have to turn around and fly back. I am too late to save the Mustang, but the Focke-Wulf 190 is slow and slow from fighting the Mustang, so I can get behind it quickly. I get one hit in my first attack, but no major damage, and then I barrel roll around and come back in behind the last 190 and get a good burst into his wing, which takes it out. Well, and this is it for this fight. I thought a bit of low altitude dogfight is nice for a change. So overall I would say the Mustang is a capable plane, decent at many things, but not really especially great at something in particular. I think it's fun to fly, but I personally prefer the Bf-109 because of its power to weight ratio, which fits my current playstyle simply better. Well, and this is it for this video. I hope it was entertaining, thanks for watching, and maybe I'll see you next time.